I'm really thrilled to be here. I want to thank Elizabeth Horner in particular. People have been so warm and generous to me here at the Michael Carlos Museum, and it's really a privilege to be able to be here with you again. I want to say, as I did the last time I was here, that for me, there's been more of a homecoming than I anticipated, and ended up running into very dear friends from New York and from Washington and from other walks of life, and I won't try to name everyone, but my dear old friends will know what I mean when I dedicate this talk to the memory of Laura J. Smith and Ethel B. O'Malley. We were hearing Ben Webster play Funny Valentine as you were walking in. Beautiful Ben, giving you that kind of beautiful moaning version of that tune. And my subject today has evolved beyond the title you were given to something like what we see here. In any case, love is my title this Valentine's season. And I want to talk about love as it comes through these paintings, but I also want to talk about an aspect of love that has given me a great deal of trouble thinking through and fascination as I've tried to understand it. We usually think of influence from one artist to another as involving what Harold Bloom called anxiety of influence, in which you want to overcome the person who was standing in your way before, not to kill the father, then at least to give him a good bump out of the road. And it strikes me that, like jazz artists, Bearden didn't feel this way. Jazz artists will tell you in a minute who it is that they love the most. They'll tell you they love Lester Young and Dexter Gordon. The singers will talk about Billie Holiday and Sarah Vaughan and Ella Fitzgerald. They don't know what these people did. Of course, most of the ones I've named now have passed away, but their memory continues on. Their memory is revered by the artists who come after them. Bearden often said that as important as personal inspiration is to the artist, that in the end, Malraux was right, that art comes from other art, and that you just simply must wrestle with and adore and work through the examples of the artists whose work comes before. In a sense, that's all the only point I want to make today, that Bearden tried to make you see his models that inspired him. At the same time, he believed, though he wouldn't have used this word, he believed in something that the Roman writers called emulatio, or emulation. You wanted to be like them, but you didn't want to be just like them. You wanted to find your own way. This is a jazz value as well, where you want to sound like Louis Armstrong. Okay, Roy Hargrove wants to sound like Miles Davis, but it's never enough to produce a perfect copy in any art form, at least of all in jazz, where you have to find your own voice. So that in that same spirit, you emulated the artist, but you wanted to push through the example to the golden point of finding your own voice. And it's that kind of process that I'm calling a loving process, so that you're adoring Rembrandt and Manet and Monet and the others who come before as you try to work through and find your own identity. The last time I talked, it was about parts and pieces, and I tried to make the point that as you look at a collage by Bearden, you're looking at an idea of a person as containing many different faces and aspects and values and travels, and likewise at a community that was parts and pieces. Miguel de Montaigne said that we are all a collage as individuals and as a community. It's something that I think inspired many moderns. Of course, Montaigne was an early modern, about the time, just before Shakespeare, modern in that sense, early modern. But he's very modern in the sense that he saw that we had this aspect. Like one of his heroes, Matisse, Bearden liked to draw with scissors. This is a little sketch that we found in his papers of talking about how he liked to start with a drawing and work with that, and with the paint he would do it, but often it came down, or for him, to cutting out the pieces and trying to make them fit together. Also in his archive we found these wonderful pieces that he literally would move around from one work to the next. There was a show in Paris last year of Matisse's pieces, as it were. The whole wall covered with stuff from Matisse's collection of stuff. And he would move it around, as we know, and put the diver here and the swimmer there. And Bearden was the same way. He would take these pieces and use them and then reuse them as he worked from piece to piece. And so as you see one of the finished pieces, you see this idea of pieces and parts coming together and suggesting a community that's very complicated and very fitting together, yes, but complicatedly so. My theme last time was that the self in Bearden's eyes and under his artistic hand was not broken, as many people have said, even those misinterpreting his paintings have said that. Not broken, but layered. Community and the person as one part over another. I pointed out last time that this one looking around the corner is part of this kind of secret part of the community. You know, we got things to hide as well as things to show as a community. Bearden was influenced by the collages of many of the moderns, Braque and Matisse, Picasso, and others. But he's also got his eye on these quilters that he would have seen in North Carolina and elsewhere. He taught himself to sew enough to make this piece called Patchwork Quilt. Elizabeth Alexander, the poet, says that there's a direct relation between the patchwork quilts that one sees in American life, and certainly in African American life, and the collage. She says that every time Bearden makes a collage, there's a kind of tribute to those makers of quilts and to the people who worked with cloth across the traditions, not of course excluding the Kente cloth makers whose work we see here. I mentioned last time too that if you travel, as I do, through the world of vintage clothing, you see works like this that are for sale, and the seller will say, "Oh, it's so beautifully stitched," or they'll even say, "Oh, the stains." And here, the idea that stitching can involve repairing and making something beautiful in its repaired state, and perhaps as strong or stronger than ever, I think also suggests, as I was trying to do last time, an ethical dimension to all this. As the things are held together, there's an impulse to do what one psychiatrist calls to repair, i.e. to love. She argues that to love is to be willing to fix things. As you make a mistake, as you stay too long at the party, you have one drink too many, whatever it is that you did, you need somebody to forgive you for that. And so the idea of repair is an important one and is related to these collages, I think. In one interview, Bearden said the demagogue will say, "Now you're dealing with chaos, vote for me." He sees chaos as his opportunity for power. The artist, on the other hand, sees chaos as a chance for redemption. Bearden was not terribly vocal in his religious practices or in church every Sunday, but he always talked about how art celebrates the self. There's always a victory. There's always a story of redemption. There's always a story, if you will, of love. And so when you see these parts and pieces struggling to fit together, he's not seeing disarray, he's seeing a chance for redemption. His cousin was Duke Ellington. And so Ellington was often at their dinner table, in and out of the house. Ellington bought one of the early paintings from the Christ series, by the way. One of his first series was about the Gospels. And here's Ellington, caught after a show. If you can imagine Ellington, now it's midnight, and they say, "Hey, can we shoot a quick bit of film?" And Ellington is worn out. He wants to get back to the hotel and work on his new piece of music. He would write late at night. And so he says, okay, do it quick and I'll do it. And they ask him, do you write the music of your people? Now, Ellington didn't want to be cornered into thinking of himself as writing only one kind of music of his people. And so watch how he responds. This as part of my discussion of layering and the complexity of the person.
Ellington was adamant in his refusal to be confined to categories, whether regarding his music or his identity. When asked about his relationship to his people, his response could be unpredictable.
Yeah, I'm glad you're recording this. I want to hear that. The music of my people is what? It has to do with the what? No, what is that? No, that's a strange question. I was afraid you were going to do this. Get me out here on this tape and expose me to my own ignorance or something. Let's see, my people. Now, which of my people? I mean, I'm in several groups. I'm in the group of the piano players. I'm in the group of the listeners. I'm in the groups of people who have general appreciation of music. I'm in the group of those who aspire to be dilettantes. I'm in the group of those who attempt to produce something fit for the plateau. And I'm in the group of those who appreciate Beaujolais. And then, of course, and then because I have such a strong influence by the music of the people. The people, that's the better word. The people rather than my people. Because the people are my people.
Okay, dude. And of course, nobody did more. What do we got here? Nobody did more music honoring his people than Duke Ellington did. He's Black, Brown, and Beige. He does a Liberian suite. He does a suite in honor of Senegal. He does the Virgin Islands. On and on and on, telling the story. But like Bearden, he wanted to make it clear that as devoted as he was to telling this story, that's not the only story he can tell. And he's not going to tell it only in one way anyhow. And so even though Ellington has a piece of music that he called My People, meaning African American people, he also had a piece called Serenade to Sweden, about which we'll hear a little more a little bit later. And that's the kind of thing that I think is important about the show that we're seeing here. That it's African and American, it's European and Asian, it's American in a very rich way. It's definitely Harlem, New York style, but it's also Harlem Dutch style. And Bearden is very aware of all of that. I want to talk about jazz more than I've done so far, exactly. In fact, jazz offers the theory behind this talk, if there's a theory that you can call it as such. I want to talk about the way Armstrong worked in particular and Ellington, but also how the way they worked influenced the way that Bearden worked. Bearden said that jazz was not just a subject for him, but a way to make art. The more I played around with visual notions as if I were an improvising jazz musician, the more I realized what I wanted to do as a painter and how I wanted to do it. So as we look at the pieces here, if you imagine him, let's say, cutting with scissors, drawing with scissors, seeing what, he's got something here and he's going to balance it over there, I think you've got a good sense of what Bearden is up to. In one interview, he says, look, you have to begin somewhere. So you put something down. Then you put something else with it, and then you see how that works. Once you get going, all sorts of things begin to open up. Sometimes something just falls into place, like piano keys that every now and then just seem to be right where your fingers happen to come down. So I think he wants to work, he's obviously playing it out, and he's obviously thinking of the Odyssey, but he wants it to have some of the freshness of new invention. Something like when Chopin calls his pieces impromptu, he wants it to have some of that made up on the spot quality. Here's Bearden being interviewed for a television show. I believe it's in Denmark. He's on screen with another artist, Herbert Gentry, his friend. And here you get as clear a case as I could present for you of Bearden as a jazz painter. They've got music playing in the background. The two of them are talking stuff and painting as they work. But listen with a special care to Bearden. Of course, Bearden is the gentleman on the left here, the man in the hat. When he talks about what the jazz qualities are, he's talking, among other things, about the kinds of things that he wants in his own painting. It's the speed, he says. But I'm not going to let him tell that story.
Some of the aspect of abstract expressionism, dissonance, the fact of action, of moving into your painting like a Jackson Pollock, are all attributes of jazz.
Well, even the artists, many of the artists, the famous artists who were in the beginning of that period, will tell you that most of them worked while listening to jazz, while having jazz musicians around, and they would go to the different jazz clubs and sit in, they could play, or just listen to them play and go back and express themselves plastically. I mean, I know even Larry Rivers mentioned that, and I know Pollock mentioned that, and also de Kooning said that too. So I think from that aspect, that gave a very, very strong incentive for artists to continue working in that field, jazz music.
And as America, it was the speed. You know, it was different from
That's
other
true.
countries.
That's
You know,
right.
the speed,
Yes.
the dissonance, the movement, the traffic lights, and everything, you know, abstract expression.
Well, together something else, many other things in jazz also. I mean, jazz was a new expression, was a new thing. And it was created by a new man, a black American, the newest man alive, who didn't have the forefathers to tell him what to do, like, for example, the French, who followed their forefathers. We had to start new things. And so abstract expressionism got that from jazz. They started a new way to paint.
Watch this now.
Thanks.
Now, we could take this if we wanted to, like perfectly, and make this in place something like African sculpture. This head, or the figure coming down here, see? They're putting this in and making that.
So we're still listening to the music brings
But we're
life.
still listening and moving to that rhythm. See, and this is more of the States.
Where?
When they're going to see the red, right here. Skip.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
See, curve.
Yes, I've been seeing stuff.
At this, seeing the right around it and bringing out that color.
That's beautiful. Bring that out there.
See, we're bringing out the pictures that came out of it. His head. What to say, Herbie, voila.
Voila. Say ça, mon vieux. You remember in Paris, room? We sitting in a cafe, huh? You just take those pencils out. You look up, drink a little wine. I drank some too. You drink a little wine, and I drank some
There's
too.
some blue here.
We got a little bit of blue in there.
Drop a little blue.
Yeah. I like this color.
Yeah.
You take it from here. See, I see something else there. Very, yeah, yes. Yeah. Ooh. I like that. That's interesting. Very good. dance. Well, so you usually have, there is an inner dance that also is not expressed physically, it's inner. Yeah, I kind of like that.
In a kind of a puritanical world, there was America at that particular time. After World War I, you know, people began to come to the cotton club and all of the dances and the day tomorrow because they wanted to learn how to have a good time, to express themselves, to enjoy not just the freedom, but a creative freedom that New York and Ellington and Callaway, all of the great entertainers at that time had to offer. And what we're trying to do is catch again some of the rhythms of that time and the beliefs of all the people.
So it's amazing. I mean, we get a view of jazz as something that's playful, improvised, that involves collaboration and other qualities that I won't enumerate here. I could spend more time talking about improvisation, which is a key word for Homer as well as for Bearden. The first lines of the poem describe Odysseus as polytropos, the man of many tropes or many ways, sometimes translated as many tricks and turns. He's the one who'll get you, if you're trapped inside the cave, he'll get you out of there. Some of you. Some of us want to make it. But he's a trickster, he's an improviser, and I'm sure Bearden was fascinated by him, in part because he's a hero and also because he has this other heroic quality associated with jazz. Jazz has a lot of different things that define it, but I want to talk about three particular definitions of jazz this time. One is this thing, ecstasy of influence, where you love the person who came before. You want to be Bird, you want to be Johnny, you want to be Coltrane. Antagonistic cooperation,